Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly. I am Pemberton, this is part 22. First, the famous tale how the Amazons met the young men of Scythia, and from that meeting came the Sauromatae, whose women ride and hunt and go to war. Then the war itself, and it is a war unlike any other. The Scythians will not stand and fight, they retreat, fill in their own wells, burn the grass, and lead Darius in a great pointless circle while his men starve. They send him a riddle of a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows they nearly trap him, and Darius, the king of kings, must creep away in the dark and run for the bridge. Let us continue.
About the Sauromatae, the following story is told. When the Hellenes had fought with the Amazons, whom the Scythians call Oiropata, a name meaning in Hellenic tongue slayers of men, since they call a man Oir and Pata means to slay, the Hellenes, after conquering them in the battle at the Thermodon, sailed away carrying with them in 3 ships as many Amazons as they had been able to take prisoner. Out on the open sea, the Amazons attacked the men and threw them out of the ships. But they knew nothing about ships, nor how to use rudders, sails, or oars, and after casting out the men, they were driven about by wave and wind until they came to that part of the Maeotian lake where Cremoi stands. Cremoi is in the land of the free Scythians. There the Amazons disembarked from the ships and made their way into the country. Meeting first with a herd of horses at pasture, they seized them, mounted them, and plundered the property of the Scythians. The Scythians, meanwhile, could not understand what was happening. They knew neither the Amazons' speech nor their dress nor what race they belonged to, and they wondered where they had come from. They thought the Amazons were men of an age corresponding to their appearance. At last they fought a battle against them. After the battle, the Scythians gained possession of the bodies of the dead, and so discovered that they were women. Therefore they took counsel and resolved by no means to continue trying to kill them. Instead they decided to send against them the youngest men from among themselves, estimating the number so as to send just as many men as there were women. These young men were told to encamp near the Amazons, and do whatever the Amazons did. If the women came after them, they were not to fight, but to retreat before them, and when the women stopped, they were to come close and encamp. The Scythians adopted this plan because they wanted children to be born from them. The young men were sent out and did as they had been commanded. When the Amazons perceived that they had not come to harm them, they left them alone, and the 2 camps came nearer to one another every day. The young men, like the Amazons, had nothing except their arms and their horses, and they got their living as the Amazons did, by hunting and by taking plunder. At midday the Amazons used to scatter, either 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, going some distance apart from one another to relieve themselves. The Scythians noticed this and did the same thing. One of the Scythians came near one of the Amazons who was by herself, and she did not reject him, but allowed him to lie with her. She could not speak to him, since they did not understand one another's language, but she made signs with her hand for him to come the next day to the same place, and to bring another man with him. She signified that there should be 2 of them, and that she too would bring another woman. When the young man returned, he reported this to the others. The next day he came himself to the place and brought another man, and he found the Amazon waiting with another woman in her company. When the rest of the young men heard this, they too in turn won over the rest of the Amazons. We have parents and possessions. So let us no longer lead this kind of life, but let us go away to the main body of our people and live with them. We will have you for wives and no others. We would not be able to live with your women, for we and they do not have the same customs. We shoot with bows, hurl javelins, and ride horses, but we never learn the works of women. Your women do none of the things we have mentioned, but stay in the wagons and perform women's work, going neither to the hunt nor anywhere else. We therefore would not be able to live in agreement with them. But if you desire to keep us as your wives and to be thought honest men, go to your parents and obtain from them your share of the goods, then let us go and live by ourselves. The young men agreed and did this. When they had obtained the share of goods that belonged to them and had returned to the Amazons, the women spoke to them again. We are filled with fear and trembling at the thought that we must live in this place, after having not only separated you from your fathers, but also done great damage to your land. Since you think it right to have us as your wives, do this together with us. Come, let us leave this land, cross over the river Tanais, and live there. The young men agreed to this also. They crossed over the Tanais, and made their way toward the rising sun for a 3 days' journey from the Tanais, and also toward the north wind for a 3 days' journey from the Maeotian lake. When they arrived at the place where they are now settled, they took up their dwelling there. From then on, the women of the Sauromatae have practiced their ancient way of life. They regularly go out on horseback to hunt, both with the men and apart from them. They regularly go to war, and they wear the same clothing as the men. The Sauromatae, I use the Scythian tongue, though from the first they have spoken it incorrectly, since the Amazons did not learn it thoroughly. As for marriage, their rule is this: no maiden is married until she has slain one of their enemies. Some of them even grow old and die before they are married, because they are unable to fulfill the requirement of the law. To the kings of these nations that have been mentioned in order, the messengers of the Scythians came, finding them gathered together. They spoke to them, declaring that the Persian king, after subduing everything to himself on the other continent, had laid a bridge over the neck of the Bosphorus and crossed to this continent. Having crossed over and subdued the Thracians, he was now making a bridge over the river Ister, desiring to bring all these regions also under his power. Do not stand aside and allow us to be destroyed. Let us all become of one mind and oppose the man who is coming against us. If you will not do this, we for our part will be forced either to leave our land or to stay in it and make a treaty with the invader. For what else can we do if you are unwilling to help us? And for you afterward it will be no easier at all. The Persian has come no less against you than against us, and it will not satisfy him to subdue us and leave you alone. We will mention strong evidence for the truth of what we say. If the Persian were making his expedition against us alone, because he desired to take vengeance for our former rule over them, he ought to have left all the rest alone and come straight to invade our land. In that way he would have made it clear to everyone that he was marching to fight the Scythians and not the rest. But in fact, ever since he crossed over to this continent, he has compelled all who came in his way to submit to him, and he now holds under him not only the other Thracians, but also the Getae, who are our nearest neighbors. When the Scythians proposed this, the kings who had come from the various nations took counsel together, and their opinions were divided. The kings of the Gelonians, Butenoi, and Sauromatae agreed together and accepted the proposal to help the Scythians. But the kings of the Agathiosians, Neroi, Androphagoi, Melanchthlanoi, and Tora returned this answer to the Scythians. If you had not been the first to do wrong to the Persians and begin war, then we would surely have thought you were speaking justly in asking for what you now ask, and we would have yielded to your request and shared your fortunes. But as things are, you invaded their land without us, and ruled over the Persians for as long as God permitted you, and now they in their turn, since the same God stirs them up, are repaying you in kind. As for us, we did no wrong to these men then, and now we will not attempt to wrong them unprovoked. If, however, the Persians come against our land also and do wrong first to us, then we too will refuse to submit. But until we see this, we will remain by ourselves, for we believe that the Persians have come not against us, but against those who were the authors of the wrong. When the Scythians heard this answer reported, they planned not to fight an open-pitched battle, since these nations would not join them as allies. Instead, they would retreat before the Persians, drive away their cattle from in front of them, fill in the wells and springs of water by which they passed, and destroy the grass from the ground. For this purpose they divided themselves into two bodies. They resolved that the Sauromatae should be added to one of their divisions, the one over which Scopaces was king. This force was to move straight toward the river Tanais, if the Persians turned in that direction, retreating before him along the shore of the Maeotian lake, and when the Persian marched back again, they were to come after him and pursue. This was one division of their kingdom, appointed to go by the route that has been described. The other two kingdoms, the large one over which Idanthysos was king, and the third of which Taxaches was king, were to join together as one force, with the Gelonians and Butenoi added to them. They too were to retreat before the Persians, keeping one day's march in front of them, going out of their way and doing what had been planned. First they were to move straight toward the countries that had refused their alliance, so that they might involve these also in the war. Though these peoples had not voluntarily undertaken the war with the Persians, the Scythians meant to draw them into it against their will. After that they were to return to their own land and attack the enemy, if in council it should seem good to do so. Having formed this plan, the Scythians went to meet the army of Darius, sending the best of their horsemen ahead as scouts. But all the wagons in which their children and women lived, together with all their cattle, except only what was sufficient to supply them with food, they sent onward, ordering them to keep moving continually toward the north wind. These were being carried on ahead. When the scouts who went in front of the Scythians discovered the Persians about 3 days' march from the Ister, the Scythians, having found them, continued to pitch their camp 1 day's march in front, destroying utterly whatever grew from the ground. When the Persians saw that the Scythian horsemen had appeared, they followed after them along their track, while the Scythians continually moved on. Since the Scythians had directed their march toward the first of their divisions, the Persians continued to pursue them toward the east and the river Tanais. When the Scythians crossed the river Tanais, the Persians crossed after them and still continued to pursue until they had passed completely through the land of the Sauromatae and had come to that of the Butenoi. As long as the Persians were passing through Scythia and the land of the Sauromatae, they had nothing to destroy, since the land was bare. But when they invaded the land of the Butenoi, they came upon the wooden wall, which had been deserted by the Butenoi and left wholly unoccupied, and they destroyed it by fire. Having done so, they continued following farther in the tracks of the enemy, until they had passed through the whole of this land and arrived at the desert. This desert region is occupied by no men. It lies above the land of the Butenoi and extends for a 7 days' journey. Above this desert live the Thysagetae, and 4 large rivers flow from them through the land of the Maeotians and run into what is called the Maeotian lake. Their names are Lycos, Oros, Tanais, and Sigis. When Darius came to the desert region, he stopped his march and halted his army on the river Oros. After doing this, he began building 8 large fortifications at equal distances from one another, about 60 furlongs apart. Their ruins still existed down to my time. While he was occupied with this, the Scythians whom he was pursuing went around by the upper parts and returned back to Scythia. Since they had altogether disappeared, and were no longer seen by the Persians at all, Darius left those fortifications half finished. Then he turned back and began to march westward, supposing that these Scythians were the whole body and that they were fleeing toward the west. Marching his army as quickly as possible, Darius came to Scythia and met the two divisions of the Scythians together. Having fallen in with them, he continued to pursue them, while they withdrew out of his way one day's journey ahead. Since Darius did not stop following them, the Scythians, according to the plan they had made, continued retreating before him toward the land of those who had refused to give their alliance, first toward the land of the Melpomene. When both Scythians and Persians together had invaded and disturbed these people, the Scythians led the way to the country of the Anthrophagoi. When these two had been disturbed, they proceeded to the land of the Neroi. While the Neroi also were being disturbed, the Scythians kept retreating before the enemy toward the Agathioceans. But the Agathioceans, seeing that their neighbors, too, were fleeing from the Scythians and had been disturbed, sent a herald before the Scythians invaded their land. They proclaimed to the Scythians not to set foot within their borders, warning them that if they attempted to invade the country, they would first have to fight with them. After giving this warning, the Agathioceans came out armed to their borders, intending to drive off those who were coming upon them. But the Melpomene, Anthrophagoi, and Neroi, when the Persians and Scythians together invaded them, did not turn to brave defense. They forgot their former threat and fled in confusion ever farther north toward the desert region. When the Agathioceans warned them off, the Scythians no longer tried to come against them, but led the Persians from the country of the Neroi back to their own land. Since this went on for a long time and did not stop, Darius sent a horseman to Theosos, king of the Scythians. "You most strange man, why do you keep fleeing forever when you could do one of two things? If you think yourself able to oppose my power, stand still, stop wandering, and fight. But if you admit that you are too weak, then stop your march in that case too, and come speak with your master, bringing him gifts of earth and water. My case, O Persian, is this. Never yet have I fled because I was afraid, either before this time from any other man, or now from you. Nor have I done anything different now from what I was accustomed to do also in time of peace. As for the reason why I do not fight with you at once, this too I will declare to you. We have neither cities nor land sown with crops, about which we should fear lest they be captured or laid waste, and so join battle with you more quickly. But if it is necessary by all means to come to this quickly, know that we have tombs in which our fathers are buried. Come now, find these and attempt to destroy them, and then you will know whether we will fight with you for the tombs or whether we will not fight. Before that, however, unless the impulse comes upon us, we will not join battle with you. About fighting, let what has been said be enough. As for masters, I acknowledge none over me except Zeus my ancestor and Hestia, the queen of the Scythians. To you then, instead of gifts of earth and water, I shall send such things as it is fitting for you to receive, and in return for your saying that you are my master, I say this, woe betide you. This is the proverbial saying of the Scythians. The herald departed to report this to Darius. When the kings of the Scythians heard mention of submission to a master, they were filled with anger. Accordingly they sent the division appointed to join the Sauromatae, the division commanded by Scopaces, ordering them to go speak with the Ionians who were guarding the bridge over the Ister. Meanwhile, those who remained behind resolved not to lead the Persians wandering about any longer, but to attack them constantly whenever they were getting provisions. So they watched the soldiers of Darius as they gathered provisions and did what they had decided. The Scythian cavalry always routed the enemy cavalry, but as the Persian horsemen fled, they fell back on the infantry, and the infantry came up to help them. Meanwhile, when the Scythians had driven in the cavalry, they turned back, fearing the foot soldiers. The Scythians also made similar attacks by night. The thing that, strangely enough, most helped the Persians and hindered the Scythians in their attacks on the camp of Darius was the voice of the asses and the appearance of the mules. As I have said before, Scythia produces neither ass nor mule. In the Scythian country there is no ass or mule at all because of the cold. The asses, by braying riotously, used to throw the Scythian cavalry into confusion. Often, when they were in the middle of riding against the Persians, the horses heard the voices of the asses and turned back in confusion, amazed and pricking up their ears, because they had never heard such a voice or seen the shape of the creature before. So far, then, the Persians had a small advantage in the war. But whenever the Scythians saw that the Persians were troubled, they wanted them to remain longer in Scythia and suffer from lack of everything. Therefore they would leave some of their own cattle behind with the herdsmen, while they themselves rode away to another place. The Persians would come upon the cattle and take them, and after taking them they were elated at what they had done. As this happened often, Darius at last began to be in difficulty. The kings of the Scythians, perceiving this, sent a herald bearing gifts to Darius, a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. The Persians asked the bearer what the gifts being offered meant, but he said that he had been commanded to do nothing more than give them and get away as quickly as possible. He told the Persians to find out for themselves, if they had wisdom, what the gifts were meant to express. Hearing this, the Persians took counsel with one another. Darius' opinion was that the Scythians were giving him both themselves and earth and water. He guessed this because a mouse is produced in the earth and feeds on the same produce of the earth as man, a frog lives in water, and a bird has great resemblance to a horse. Moreover, in giving the arrows they were surrendering their own power in battle. This was the opinion Darius expressed. But Gobryas, one of the 7 men who killed the Magian, held a different opinion. He guessed that the gifts meant, unless you become birds and fly up into heaven, O Persians, or become mice and sink down under the earth, or become frogs and leap into the lakes, you will not return home, but will be struck down by these arrows. The Persians then were trying to interpret the gifts. Meanwhile, the single division of the Scythians, the one appointed at first to keep guard along the Maeotian lake and then to go to the Ister to speak with the Ionians, arrived at the bridge. Ionians, we have come bringing you freedom, if only you are willing to listen to us. We are informed that Darius commanded you to guard the bridge for 60 days only, and then, if he had not arrived within that time, to go away to your own land. Now therefore, if you do as we say, you will be without blame from him and without blame from us. Stay the appointed days, and after that go away. When the Ionians had pledged themselves to do this, the Scythians hurried back again by the quickest route. Meanwhile, after the gifts had come to Darius, the Scythians who remained had arrayed themselves against the Persians with both foot and horse, intending to fight. When the Scythians had taken battle order, a hare darted through them into the space between the 2 armies, and each company of them, as they saw the hare, began to run after it. When the Scythians were thus thrown into disorder and were shouting loudly, Darius asked what this clamor was arising from the enemy. When he heard that they were running after the hare, he spoke to the men to whom he was accustomed to speak at other times. These men have very little regard for us, and I now perceive that Gobryas spoke rightly about the Scythian gifts. Since I myself now think that matters stand so, we need good counsel, so that our retreat home may be made safely. O king, even by report I was almost certain how difficult these men were to deal with, and after coming here I learned it still more thoroughly, since I saw that they were mocking us. Now therefore my opinion is this: as soon as night comes, let us kindle the campfires as we are accustomed to do at other times, deceive with a false story those of our men who are weakest in enduring hardships, tie up all the asses, and get away before either the Scythians make for the Ister to destroy the bridge, or the Ionians resolve on something that may be our ruin. Thus Gobryas advised. After this, when night came, Darius acted on his opinion. He left behind in the camp those of his men who were weakened by fatigue, and whose loss was of least account, and he also left the asses tied up. He left the asses so that they might make a noise that could be heard, and he left the weaker men of his army because of their weakness, but the public pretext was that he was about to attack the Scythians with the effective part of the army, while they were to defend the camp meanwhile. After giving these instructions to those left behind and lighting the campfires, Darius hastened by the quickest road toward the Ister. The asses, no longer surrounded by the usual crowd, made their voices heard much more for that reason, and the Scythians, hearing the asses, supposed that the Persians were surely remaining in their former place. But when day came, those left behind realized that they had been betrayed by Darius. They held out their hands in submission to the Scythians and told them what their situation was. When the Scythians heard this, they joined together as quickly as possible, the 2 combined divisions of the Scythians, the single division, and also the Sauromatae, Budinoi, and Gelonians. They began to pursue the Persians, making straight for the Ister. But since the Persian army consisted for the most part of foot soldiers and did not know the roads not being marked with tracks, while the Scythian army consisted of horsemen and knew the shortest paths, they missed one another, and the Scythians arrived at the bridge much before the Persians. Having learned that the Persians had not yet arrived, they spoke to the Ionians who were in the ships. Ionians, the days of your count are past, and you are not acting rightly by still remaining here and waiting. Since before you stayed out of fear, now break up the passage as quickly as you can, and depart free and unharmed, giving thanks both to the gods and to the Scythians. As for the man who was formerly your master, we will so convince him that he shall never again march with an army against any nation. At this the Ionians took counsel together. Miltiades the Athenian, who was commander and despot of the men of the Chersonese and the Hellespont, held the opinion that they should follow the advice of the Scythians and set Ionia free. But Histios the Milesian held the opposite opinion. He said that at the present time it was through Darius that each of them ruled as despot over a city. If the power of Darius were destroyed, he himself would not be able to rule over the Milesians, nor would any of the others be able to rule over any other city, for each city would choose to have popular rule rather than despotic rule. When Histios stated his opinion in this way, all at once turned to this opinion, though at first they had been adopting that of Miltiades. These were the men who voted between the 2 opinions, and they were men of consequence in the eyes of the king. First there were the despots of the Hellespontians, Daphnes of Abydos, Hippoclos of Lampsacos, Hierophantos of Parian, Metrodoros of Proconnesos, Aristogoras of Cyzicos, and Ariston of Byzantium. These were the men from the Hellespont. From Ionia there were Strates of Chios, Ags of Samos, Laodamas of Phocaea, and Histios of Miletos, whose opinion had been put forward in opposition to that of Miltiades. Of the Iolians, the only man of consequence present there was Aristogoras of Chyme. When these men adopted the opinion of Histios, they resolved to add to it both deeds and words as follows. They would break up the part of the bridge on the side toward the Scythians, breaking it up for a distance equal to the range of an arrow, both so that they might seem to be doing something, though in fact they were doing nothing, and also because they feared the Scythians might try to use force and cross the Ister by means of the bridge. While breaking up the part of the bridge towards Scythia, they resolved to say that they would do everything the Scythians desired. This they added to the opinion that had been proposed. Then Histios came forward from among them and answered the Scythians. Scythians, you have come bringing good news, and you have made timely haste in bringing it. You on your side give us good guidance, and we on ours are rendering suitable service to you. As you see, we are breaking up the passage, and we shall show every zeal in our desire to be free. While we are breaking up the bridge, it is fitting for you to search for those of whom you speak, and when you have found them, take vengeance on them on our behalf as well as your own, in the manner they deserve. The Scythians, believing for the second time that the Ionians were speaking the truth, turned back to search for the Persians, but they completely missed the line of the Persians' march through the land. The Scythians themselves were the cause of this, since they had destroyed the pastures for horses in that region, and had choked up the springs of water with earth. If they had not done this, it would have been easy for them, if they wished, to discover the Persians. But as it was, they failed precisely because of the measures in which they thought they had acted best. The Scythians passed through those regions of their own land where there was grass for the horses and springs of water, and they searched for the enemy there, supposing that the Persians too were retreating through country of that kind. In fact, the Persians marched carefully along the track they had made before, and so they found the river crossing, though with difficulty. Since they arrived by night and found the bridge broken up, they were brought to the extreme of fear, thinking that the Ionians might have deserted them. Now there was with Darius an Egyptian who had a louder voice than any other man on earth. Darius ordered this man to take his stand on the bank of the Ister and call Histios of Miletus. The Egyptian did so, and Histios, hearing the first shout, brought out all the ships to carry the army across and also put the bridge together again. Thus the Persians escaped, and the Scythians, in their search, missed the Persians for the second time as well. The Scythians judge the Ionians in this way. If they are regarded as free men, they are the most worthless and cowardly of all men. But if they are regarded as slaves, they are the most attached to their master and the least disposed to run away of all slaves. This is the reproach the Scythians cast against the Ionians. Darius then marched through Thrace and arrived at Sestos in the Chersonese. From there he crossed over in his ships to Asia, but he left a Persian named Megabazos to command his army in Europe. Darius had once honored this Megabazos by a saying uttered in the land of Persia. Darius was beginning to eat pomegranates, and as soon as he opened the first of them, his brother Artabanos asked him what he would wish to have in as great a number as the seeds in the pomegranate. Darius said that he would rather have that many men like Megabazos than have Hellas subject to him. In Persia, then, he honored him with these words, and at this time he left him in command with 8 myriads of his army. This Megabazos uttered one saying by which he left an imperishable memory of himself among the peoples of the Hellespont. Once, when he was at Byzantium, he heard that the men of Chalcedon had settled in that region 17 years before the Byzantines. When he heard this, he said that the people of Chalcedon at that time must have been blind, for surely they would not have chosen the worst place, when they could have settled in the better one, if they had not been blind. It was this Megabazos who was left in command at that time in the land of the Hellespontians, and he proceeded to subdue all who did not take the side of the Medes.
And we will stop there, with Darius back across the Danube by the skin of his teeth, his Scythian adventure a costly humiliation, and the loyalty of his Ionian Greeks now the only thing that saved him a debt, and a danger, that Herodotus wants us to remember. Next time, in part 23, we leave the cold north entirely and sail south to sunlit Libya, to the founding of Sion and the long troubles of its kings. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.